The first navigation pitfall that we'll be talking about is called getting lost in menu space. In this lesson, we'll start to answer the following questions. The first is, how do I show what's interesting outside of my field of view? And then how do I navigate to that? What is the keyhole effect and how do we overcome it? And then we'll just start kind of chipping away at this idea of designing a natural perceptual field to direct attention to interesting areas and to make navigation fluid to get to these areas. This last one will actually be the focus of the next lesson. Before we dig into getting lost in menu space, let's talk about menus first. So what you're looking at here is the homepage for Ohio State, and you can see the menuing is right through here. Here's the main menu. Because it's hyperlinked, there are other navigation tools like down here. Well, let's focus on the main menu here for just a second. So if I want, these are arguably the most important things, future students, current students, alumni, faculty, staff, academics, etc. And if I want to find out more about any of those, I can press it. And I can see some of the subpages or that kind of section. If I want a different section, I can then press that. I can go and see all of the different parts of the university and what they think are the important things that I should know about Ohio State. If I actually want to change my display, so I've actually found something I think that I want, let's say I want to see the academic calendar, I can go click on that, and then it actually changes completely to a totally different display. And oh, by the way, it actually changes my menu as well. Now I have a completely different main menu. I'm in a completely different place now. This type of menuing system, especially in a large university, has its own problems if we're just talking about actions, but as we'll see in a second, it has even more problems when we have to try to facilitate other macrocognitive processes like sense-making or replanning in a more dynamic setting. On mobile devices, we have some other kind of navigation systems. They're not necessarily menus per se, but some of them are. In this one, I have a navigation that I can go to all of these different 12 things. So I can see a little iconic picture of them and maybe give me a little bit of understanding more than just the word about what I'm going to see there, but not really. And if anything changes behind any of these things, I don't get to see those changes. This is a pretty common menuing system for the mobile. It's very similar to that main menu we saw in the web. Again, maybe I get a little bit of dynamicism here. I have one notification, or I have two notifications, or I have three, and maybe that gives me some indication that I should go there, but not really that much. This other menu is called the hamburger menu. It actually comes, if I press a button, that's actually sitting right about there, and this will kind of pop out to the side and give me some more information. That hamburger menu, though, is very little context. It tells me just about zero about what I'm going to get when I press it or when I should press it. So again, this gives us some pause or some problem when I'm just trying to help somebody select an action, but we'll see what happens in a dynamic environment when we want the system to help tell us, or the technology to help tell us what should we be thinking about or how should we be undergoing sense making. So now that we're thinking about workspaces for visualizations, I want you to think about our two major goals for the workspace, the displays and the navigation between them. The first is clearly communicating system status at appropriate scoping, what's happening in the world right now, and then clearly communicate and facilitate possible actions and when they may be recommended. Now if we were just to adopt those menuing techniques straight from the web or straight from mobile, how well would it do at these two types of goals? What we find happening in practice is what we call the keyhole effect. You have this whole application, a series of tens or hundreds of screens sitting behind the screen that I'm looking at right now, but you only have just the smallest amount of information about telling us information that could help us with these two goals. Either what's going on in the world right now, that's locked behind the keyhole, and behind the same keyhole, or maybe a slightly different keyhole, is what are the actions that I could be doing right now. So it's actually pretty impoverished information space about what I should be doing next and what's happening right now. So in our first case of navigation pitfalls, we're actually going to look at what a traditional menuing system, much like the ones we just showed you on the web or in mobile. But this time now we're going to go dig deeper into that infusion pump system and how people get lost in that menu space, and then what their strategies are for not getting lost, especially in really high tempo critical situations. So let's get you firmly out of those settings like the Ohio State website or like the Ohio State mobile page where you're just kind of finding information, you're doing a little bit of foraging, you're finding some things. You've got probably a little bit of time to do it if it's not absolutely mission critical, if you don't find out in 30 seconds what the academic calendar is. Let's move you into something a little bit more sophisticated and complex. So how would you design displays for this setting where you have a surgeon, a series of nurses, potentially radiology technicians or technologists, you have an anesthesiologist, all those folks, and you have a person who really shouldn't be in surgery any longer than they need to be, so time is of the essence. How do you design displays for this? To put a very fine point on it, will this work? Will this situation work? Where again, we have this should look, maybe the details are different, but the strategy is the same. I have a display here. I have a series of menu items to get me someplace else. I have some menu items down here to get me some other places. So it's that same kind of, I've got buttons to tell me what I could do. I have a screen that's showing me what is ostensibly most important right now, and then I should just know when to go to the other things, the other screens. So this is just a color version diagram of what we showed you before with the infusion pumps. But now let me dig into exactly what we saw when we observed it. So again, these are all the different menus. This is a little bit different version of the infusion pump than I showed in the picture before. But these are all the different, what I would call functional or contextual menus to this screen. These are the more kind of hard button menus that should be present all the time. Now whether they're hardware buttons or they're software buttons is kind of immaterial. And each of these goes down into a subsection of the application. We have ECG, or we have different types of blood pressure. We have oxygen saturation and different respiratory functions, and you have the history of the patient over here in hard button land and setup. This is actually for the pump itself. And what was found was that these yellow lines and these yellow dots up here, these are the buttons and the areas in the application that people actually went to during a surgery. So there's two of them. One of them is this form of blood pressure, and then this one is this form of respiratory. And that was it. That was all that they went to during the surgeries that were seen. And within there, these are the different sub-menus that were seen. So if you look at all the different screens that were possible, this is what actually was shown. And there are two reasons basically that this happened. One was that this was tailored down, so it made it easier for you to get in and out of the screens that you needed. These other screens, either they didn't know what was going on there, or what those would be really helpful for, or when they got there, they might not be able to get out. So they started tailoring. They started kind of crunching down their kind of view of the patient based on these 6 or 7 screens, which is again a pretty impoverished view of the patient when the machine can actually provide quite a bit more. So what should you expect in this setting? So this isn't healthcare, this is a commercial aviation cockpit. And again, there are lots of displays up. You can see these displays down here, this display that's more geographic or geospatial. You have something here that looks at attitude, and things like pitch and yaw will help you hear. But I still see a lot of buttons. I still see these buttons here, and these hardware buttons correspond to something that's dynamic, but still software buttons here. But I still don't get an idea of what's behind these buttons. I don't get an idea for when it would be a good time to switch to those things. All of those good ideas would have to sit in the expertise of the person. This doesn't actively support that. So what would you expect to see here, I think, is exactly what you would expect to see in the operating theater, which is not very many of these views are being used. So now let's bring this down to earth, pardon the pun, to cars and the cockpit that we are probably a lot more comfortable or familiar with. So now we have these, this is my display, and these are the other things that I need to be able to do. And this is very action oriented. This is more like the world of the website, whereas I want to see my map, or I want to listen to an iPod song, or hit my auxiliary port, or if I don't get to do these things, or if it takes a little bit longer to do them, or I need to really focus on the driving, I can kind of punt away from this thing and focus on the other task. But what about if you have to start designing for this? This is the Google car. It's meant to be autonomous. It's meant to drive itself. There are meant to be people in it. So now we're not just designing for infotainment, we're actually designing for driving the car itself. And one of the problems that vexes the autonomous car makers right now, and the traditional car makers that are starting to build in autonomous technologies into it, is when should the person take over? So now let's switch perspectives to this guy. And so, can we use that same kind of menuing thing that we were doing before to start saying, now we could do it here? Can we actually have this person be able to see what's going on in the car, be able to switch perspectives, and be engaged when they need to be engaged, and then doing these other things when they don't want to be engaged or don't need to be engaged? You'll see there's quite a few distractions in this area to keep that person's attention away from driving or away from the road. So will this work? Will this person be calibrated well enough to be able to see what's going on in the world and take appropriate actions when they need to? And my quick answer is no, not at all. This configuration will not be successful for that task. So we'll continue on with the next lessons about other potential pitfalls. But what I really want you to get out of this one is that these kind of traditional menus that grew up with these action-oriented, kind of self-directed tasks, it's tempting to do those same kinds of things in an event-driven world with sophisticated moving parts underneath it, in the dynamic world that we have to keep track of, not just manipulate, but keep track of. These same menuing techniques are really brittle, and they will tend to not have us be well calibrated on what to attend to and when.